The staggering amount of children that are dealing with obesity, talking about large strokes and things that we could do as an American population in the MAHA movement. I just really see that as a essential piece.
Do you think the way they're going about it is better than doing it naturally?
It was the first time ever that we've seen the obesity curve flatten just recently.
Do you think that those people who are regaining the weight and even more should even go on it if it's actually kind of causing them to worsen their obesity?
Number one, you can keep some of these people on these medications at a low dose, a maintenance, whatever that maintenance dose is.
The last 5 or 6 years and been doing deep dives and certification programs on that topic, and the gut-brain axis is just blowing my mind.
Why isn't that our first call to action? I know it's your first call to action, but for most people, it's not. So I'm curious on your opinion about that.
Welcome to the Step It Up podcast. I'm Helene, and this is my daughter Penelope, and today we are welcoming Dr. Mary, and we're so excited to have her here. She's all about IBS, gut health, all things functional nutrition, functional medicine. I did a deep dive on you last night. I was like really going in there, seeing her engagement, all the beautiful things that she's up to in life for true health, whole person health, individualized health, and it was truly inspiring. And really aligned with what I've studied the last 30 years. Penelope and I are a mother-daughter duo, and we've lost over 250 pounds combined. Wow. And it is just with such reverence that we talk about this really important topic of weight loss medication, GLP-1 agonists, and to understand more about the data so people can be really empowered about the choices that they're making. This is an epidemic that is beyond measure. Actually, we could never have expected this. I was born in 1976, and so we've seen staggering increases in obesity. Now we're looking at over 40% of the population, adult population, being obese, and an even higher number that's overweight and obese.
I was going to say, when you were born compared to, let's look at like most of the data we have is like 2022 or something like that. From that time, from when you were born to that time, doubled the rates of obesity. So it was around like 22% in 1988. So even lower.
It was 15%, right? 1975, I think. I mean, that's,
crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy, and we've got to do something about it. I mean, there's urgency for healthcare professionals to do something about it. And that's what we want to get into today. We want to roll up our sleeves. We want to talk about all the things. That's where we're going to start. Do we want to talk about more stats about how staggering this problem is?
We can, or we could let Dr. Mary introduce herself and tell us a little bit about herself.
All right, Dr. Mary, I'd love you to intro yourself.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I'm a naturopathic medical doctor and really an integrative doctor, which means I take the best of anything and everything that we have. So my background is in nutrition. I got my bachelor's in nutrition from UMass, and I did my thesis in the exercise science department. So a lot of what I'm doing is truly integrative work with people, where we're talking about what are you eating, how are you moving your body, how can we optimize things. And I'm looking at somebody from a really holistic perspective. So if somebody comes in, I'm spending an hour to an hour and a half with them on the first visit. We're talking about family history. We're talking about diet, exercise, lifestyle, supplements. We're talking about any past, mental health things they've gone through, because all of these things we know affect your health right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm really fortunate that I have the time to actually do this with people because I've been in a faster paced clinic setting before, and I get it. Like, I get why we have, such an epidemic in terms of healthcare right now. Mm-hmm. Our system is not totally set up for it. And it's not a simple thing to fix either.
It's not. It's super complex. My mom was morbidly obese. Mm-hmm. And so at 59, she ended up dying, which is so sad. And I oftentimes think about her and, the severe obesity that was on her death certificate. Mm-hmm. And I understand the complexity of this issue more so than I'd like to admit. Mm-hmm. Growing up, with a 12-step program on the kitchen table. Yeah. Was there something that led you to want to study nutrition? Or what was it that had you do your thesis in exercise science? Like, what was your personal motivation?
So if I'm going to be totally honest, it was aesthetics, and I had an eating disorder.
Wow.
The reason I'm sitting here today is because of something really hard that I went through that I didn't view as totally hard while I was going through it. But the reason I went into nutrition is like, how can I lose as much weight? How can I be as skinny, thin as possible? And if you asked me then, that would not have been my answer. I will say I've always had like an intuitive kind of and just like love for physiology and biology. Like to this day, I love figuring out how the body works.
Me too.
Like the mechanisms and all the pathways. So there was this love for that, but nutrition, exercise science specifically, started from a really dark place for me. And eventually I moved through all of that, and now that's why I'm so passionate today about debunking all this stuff on social media and helping, women especially, but all people just feeling safer, healthier in their bodies and being able to decipher fact from fiction, because I went down a lot of these rabbit holes that were really detrimental. And like I see the fear mongering that still exists on social media. And I think most people are really well intentioned. And I was on the other side of that at one point, and I was like, wow, I can't eat this. And I went gluten-free and dairy-free, and I did all this stuff, and I had an eating disorder. And so there's a whole group of people that aren't speaking yet, and probably, in 10 years, like myself, like will eventually say, like, yeah, that wasn't actually healthy for me.
Love it. Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's big.
I, like you, also had an eating disorder, but it was different, I would say, in the fact that I was like a binge eater. So even though I wasn't necessarily trying to be my smallest at the time, I would just go to food to solve all my problems. And, I've since lost 150 pounds. I actually brought a photo to show you of how I used to
Is it like more like
look.
160, Penelope?
Yes, but this was me, like at age 15.
Yeah.
So I've came a long way for sure, but it was not easy. And so that's also why I have this love now for health and wellness and weight loss specifically, because I know how it feels to be morbidly obese, and it's not fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have different experiences in terms of like what we went through in that period, but I would say probably one of the bigger commonalities is how much of your day did you think about food?
Oh, all day.
Yeah,
all
so that
day
was
long.
the same for me as
Yeah.
well. Different, views
Right,
of it, but like
right.
it's the obsession around food where it wasn't like minutes would go by and I'd be like, what's my next meal? How many calories does it have? Did I log it yet? Do I need to exercise? Like consuming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to that point. On my journey to weight loss, I would do that. I would log every calorie, try to beat my caloric intake every day. I did that for a while, but then I figured it out. But
Yeah.
I relate to that. I do. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
All right, should we dive in?
Yeah.
All right, we got some questions because, Penelope, why don't you lead in with like how you reached out?
Okay, so it was really
Yeah.
interesting. So I messaged you. I found you, I think through like the MAHA movement, which is super cool. I just found people that were interested in making America healthy again, and you were like on the list of people who cared about health and were
I
interested.
didn't even
in
know
functional medicine.
I don't even know about this list.
We're just followed by people in the MAHA movement.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, who like believe, if they.
And for
follow
those of you who are listening who don't know what that is, that's Make America Healthy Again.
Yes.
It's a movement that is hopefully going to make America healthy again.
Yes. And I was like, oh, I love it. She's a functional medicine person and she's interested in wellness and whole foods. Like, I was just like, okay, this is perfect. And I love the work that you're doing around that, because I feel like more people need to be aware of holistic nutrition. So when I reached out to you, you were like, sorry, I don't think I'm who you're looking for, because I think GLP-1s are changing people's lives. And I thought that was really interesting. So that's what I want to dive in today.
Yeah, I remember I got that DM and you were looking to talk to us about something else, and I'm like, yo, definitely not the person for you. Like, you're gonna. But I loved that you wanted to have the conversation anyways, and I think this is what we're really lacking in America right now, is the willingness to have all of the conversations and then make a decision.
Exactly.
And I think it's really cool. So I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy you are. Yeah.
What do you think is the root cause of obesity?
Whew, $1 million question. I don't think that there is a root cause. I think it's multifactorial. I think it's much more complex than, it seems from the surface. We could say calories in, calories out, and that's like a huge oversimplification of what is actually going on. So, like, we know genetics play a role in obesity to the point where there's over 200 genes that regulate your BMI in different ways, your appetite, the emotional centers in your brain, your mesolimbic system, your metabolism. Like there's all of these different things. So like then you have just the genetic bucket, and that's a big piece of it for sure. Like if you have one parent who is obese, you have a much higher risk of obesity. If you have two parents that are obese, I want to say it's like a 10x risk of obesity. You obviously have a huge issue with movement right now. So one of the stats actually that I brought in is around exercise, and it's a really interesting comparison of what we have. So first of all, I didn't even realize until recently that women move less than men. So I do a lot with women and women's health, and so I just find that interesting.
That
in
is
general.
interesting, yeah. Because, I mean, we move a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
And you were outside of this range, obviously, but in general, women move less than men. But if you look at men who are 18 to 34, it's about 41% of them are meeting the requirements from the Department of Health and Human Services for aerobic activity. Now, if you go, that's 18 to 34. If you go down to 35 to 49, only 29.4% of them are meeting that criteria. And then if you go 65 and above, it's 15.3% of people are meeting that criteria. So as we age, we move less, period. And then you add that on top of the fact that over the decades, so in 1960, it was like 50% of people had jobs, like actual careers that required like moderate physical activity, so labor. You move that to 2010, now 50% or more of people are either sedentary or barely moving.
right, desk jobs, yeah, computer.
That delta there from moderately active to sedentary in terms of those numbers is enormous.
Yeah, I see a huge market need for walking desks.
Totally.
No, but that is absolutely one root cause for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have the food crisis where we know that ultra-processed foods increase the risk for overeating and obesity. And so that's a piece of it there. Where, I'm not totally on board with all the things of the MAHA movement is, we need to figure out what we have the power to change that's going to make the biggest difference.
Yes.
And so I think that sometimes we can get lost in the weeds of making really, like looking at really small details where we want to zoom out and look at the big picture.
Like what, for example? Small detail.
I mean, one of the pieces of that movement is like the red 40 dye. So
Right. Okay,
I
that's
don't
a small
believe that
detail. Okay.
That's a small detail. Like I want to like step back and look at this huge picture of like how do we educate people on eating more fruits and vegetables and lean protein.
I'm right there with you. Yes.
That versus
So simple.
taking out red 40. And I'm not saying that. Yeah, there's a little bit of research with potential carcinogenic effects. It's going to be dose dependent for sure.
Yeah.
But it's like, dude, we shouldn't spend all of our energy there when we have this like huge elephant in the back that we need to
Pun
address
intended.
first.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, I agree wholeheartedly because without those whole foods, we're not going to go anywhere. And it's shocking to me how many people don't really know where to get them, what's in season, and how to prepare them. I was on MasterChef. I love food. I make recipe books in my free time. Like I've developed culinary institutes at different organizations and institutes and universities. Like I'm really like a proponent, but I'm shocked that most people didn't learn it from their doctors, didn't learn it from their, now it's kind of like considered like anti-feminist to even teach it in school.
But men should know we should all know how to cook. You should be able to.
It's a survival skill.
It's a survival skill, yeah.
Yeah.
And it is. It's really fascinating. Like people that come to see me, they're just like, just tell me what to eat. I'll eat whatever it is. I just don't know what to do because they're confused because on social media it's like eat a bunch of butter and then it's like eat no fat and then it's like oh you should go carnivore and then it's like no you should go vegan and it just we've focused so much. It's like majoring in the minors. We've majored in the minors perfectly well on social media, and we need to take 5 steps back and say big picture because people don't know the big picture yet.
That's true.
We've lost it because of all the details. And majority of people agree on the big picture, and it's like, let's do that first. And then we can go to the next step. It's like when somebody comes to me and they're obese, they have, pre-diabetes, their LDL cholesterol and ApoB are through the roof, and they're like, should I take BPC 157, a peptide? And I'm like, whoa, let's address like the foundationals first
That's so LA, right? That's
so
such an LA move.
before we go to like, I have a course on supplements too. It's the same thing. It's like, don't go to like the 2% if you haven't addressed the 95% yet.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Everyone wants to like take that shortcut. I know you and I have tried a lot of these
We
shortcuts,
have tried a lot of these shortcuts.
including injections.
Yes.
But not of GLP-1. But,
No.
that's definitely, we've tried everything. I mean,
Sure.
except for that, actually. We haven't
Yeah.
tried it. And I think the obesity thing was, I felt really blindsided. I mean, I have a degree, a master's and bachelor's in nutrition, and I, raised Penelope in a really whole food centric household. And then she would go and cheat at the neighbors' houses at school, and then she got hooked on processed food.
Yeah.
So that was I was really blindsided. And social media.
Yeah.
She got, so this addiction, so I was shocked. I'm like, I thought that I had dodged the bullet, the genetic bullet
Yeah.
that I was predisposed to. This is not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen
Right.
to my daughter.
Yeah.
And oh boy, did it ever.
Yeah.
So I figured there was something that life was saying, like, you got to actually focus on this. And so the staggering amount of children that are dealing with obesity, talking about large strokes and things that we could do as an American population in the MAHA movement, I just really see that as a essential piece.
Totally.
Is because when we're looking at children, the 600, what was it, Penelope? There's a
600% prescriptions up since 2020 for them taking Ozempic. Is that what you're talking about?
yes.
Yeah, the prescriptions are up 600% since.
I was a fat
2020.
kid. Like
For-
my nickname was Fatso. So I know, like I was the only one.
Yeah.
And now it's like, what, 50% of the kids?
Huge. It's
Yeah.
really huge. And yeah, it's really tough to see kids struggling with something that becomes a mental health issue really quickly.
And you try as a parent to like limit it, but then you got to go to the birthday parties.
Yeah.
And they're going to school. And it's just like, at one point, it's just out of your hands. But some people are saying it's like child abuse. To let your kid become obese. And it's like, if I could have stopped it, I would have. And
Yeah.
I'm like the most qualified person that I know that could.
Yeah.
And I couldn't. And so there's something that needs to happen around empowering moms, I believe, with this childhood obesity issue.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have children that come in. I think you're.
I don't treat any kids.
Yeah.
I'm just adults. Yeah. But yeah, it's a huge, I mean, that's like a place where we need to be focusing on. I mean, if you focus on the kids, like those kids are the future generations, right? So I think it's a really, really important piece.
What do you think about kids on Ozempic?
I'm not a pediatric specialist, so I just feel like I don't have the education or knowledge behind it. But I'm interested in the topic for sure, but I wouldn't want to say yes or no because I just don't know enough about it at this point.
Well, what success have you had with GLP-1 and this topic? Because, I'm sure you've tried a lot of different things to help the women and people in your practice lose weight.
Yeah, and I don't always, most of the time, I don't start with medications at all, especially if we haven't talked about diet, exercise, lifestyle yet. So, I'm really lucky enough to have all of that time where I talk about all of it with every single person. And when I started prescribing the GLP-1s, you notice a huge shift, and it's really in the people that have already tried the diet, the exercise, the lifestyle, and they've been here for years, and they've tried, HCG, they've tried phentermine, they've tried all of these things already, and they're still like, I can't do it. And I think one of the big misconceptions is that people are lazy or people, aren't eating healthy if they are obese. And people come in and they're eating a whole foods, not processed diet. They are trying to exercise and they're still not losing weight. And so, and you have another subset of people that come in that are having a really hard time eating healthy and exercising because they're morbidly obese and their appetite is so high. And the thoughts around food in their head.
The food noise, yeah.
It's just like overwhelming. And so it's an uphill battle for them. And then you put them on the GLP-1s or, tirzepatide, the dual agonists, and that noise goes away. And now they can choose healthy foods. And then they start to lose weight and their osteoarthritis starts to heal and they feel like they can walk and exercise again because their knees aren't killing them. And so I just think there's such a valuable tool that we have in the obesity medicine space right now, and they're just that, they're a tool. They're not a panacea. I don't believe every human should be on them right now. I mean, maybe we'll get more data about like them as a longevity drug, right? But given right now, like I don't think everybody should be on them. I don't think everybody needs them for weight loss. We know in these trials that they're doing with the GLP-1s and tirzepatide is that you're seeing people in the placebo arm lose 20% of their weight, and they're not on the drugs, right? So people can obviously lose weight without these medications, but there's a subset of people that are trying that and they're still not losing weight. And for them, it's an amazing tool that we have.
What do you think is a commonality with those people who are trying hard but not losing? Is it hormonal? Is it age? What do you think it is?
That's like that's the question right there. I don't think we know the answer to it, right? Like there's things that contribute to obesity, like the gut microbiome, that we don't know the answer to that yet. We know that the gut microbiome affects our metabolism. It talks to our liver and all of the metabolic pathways that are there.
Yeah.
It talks to our brain. But we don't know what bugs help you lose weight and which ones help you put on weight, which ones are sparing calories. Like we just don't, we know like little pieces of that, but we don't have the whole puzzle there yet to say, okay, if you do a fecal transplant with donor A's stool, you are going to lose 10% of your body weight. We don't have that information yet. I think that's like what we'll start to uncover over the years.
I've heard some anecdotal information from people who've tried it, and it does work for a short period of time, but if they don't stick with the lifestyle changes that you were referencing, then it doesn't hold.
Are you saying fecal transplants?
Yeah, that there is such a thing as certain I don't know what those are yet, but
Right.
yeah, that is kind of interesting.
It's really interesting. We have rodent data for this. So we got all excited when we had these mice that were obese, and you transferred the feces of a lean mouse into an obese mouse, and it lost weight. And so we thought, oh wow, it's going to do the same in humans. And there's been anecdotal cases
Yeah.
of it, but we haven't identified what they call like a super donor. Like, what is the stool
Right.
that actually makes somebody?
I could totally see America like starting to collect thin people's feces to save the planet and make people viable for military again. And
Yeah, it's fascinating. But we don't know it yet. And so is there a hormonal piece? You know, I think that's a part of it, right? There's a genetic piece. It's multifactorial. That's why that there isn't this like easy
answer.
solution.
Yeah, I think that hormones are playing a bigger role than we understand based on our understanding of the endocrine system. But I also get concerned about the gastric upset and the altercation in the gut microbiome when people are taking Ozempic, for example, or Zepbound. They just don't have the data either on what the long-term implications of that are, and then also the psychological implications. I've been really interested in nutritional psychology the last 5 or 6 years and been doing deep dives and certification programs on that topic, and the gut-brain axis is just blowing my mind, quite literally and figuratively, because of its correlation. And then there were these reports from the UK. There were 18 deaths that
there were 18 deaths in the UK
related to
taking Ozempic, whether it was suicidal thoughts or things like that.
and it can increase depression, which is surprising and concerning, especially when the barrier of cost is no longer there.
Yeah.
And then the long-term implications of the lean muscle mass loss is another thing that has been on my radar because I believe so much. I'm such a fitness freak. I think you are too, and you're really into not freak, but you're really into it, and everyone at your practice is into it.
Yes.
And is that the Ozempic face I think is because of the loss in lean muscle mass. And so I worry about the long-term implications of that. So I don't know. I'm just curious on your thoughts about that.
Yeah. So with lean muscle mass, if you take these medications and you lose 25% of your body weight, is some of it going to be muscle? Absolutely.
Yeah, 40% they say.
It's up to 40%.
Okay.
So that's not going to be the higher range when you look at the trials. I think 45 was the highest of the ones that I've seen in terms of trials. But it can be way lower too. So it can be 15% of the weight loss being from muscle. When you lose weight, period, you see the same numbers.
Similar, yeah.
Yeah, so it's about 20 to 35% if you just use diet, exercise, lifestyle. So when we're seeing up to 45%, we also have to that's a 10% difference there, so it's not a huge difference, but also there's a huge issue in terms of measuring these numbers in all of the studies. So even if you're using a DEXA, which is going to be more of the gold standard, the better way to look at body composition, when you lose lean body mass on a DEXA, we don't know if that's actually from muscle or if it's from water and organ changes. So one of the things we've known in obesity medicine for a long time is when you lose big amounts of weight, your organs get smaller. Your kidneys get smaller, your heart gets smaller, your spleen gets smaller. All of these changes occur, and that's a normal part of weight loss. Those will show up on a DEXA as a reduction in lean body mass.
Okay.
Okay. But regardless, we know like when you're looking at the data, they've done meta-analysis here, they're not seeing a big difference between normal weight loss and from these medications at all. And when we look at these class of medications, again, like the same idea is like stepping back. It's like, yeah, we don't know some of this stuff, but these meds have been around for much longer than
25 years or so,
Yeah.
right?
So it's not like these are brand new medications. They're newer to the weight loss world, but they've been used in diabetes for a long time. And so, yeah, there's going to be a lot that we don't know. That's going to be the case with anything like this, right? But then we have to look at what we do know. And so, yes, is there a risk, for instance, one of the real like side effects of these medications that is statistically significant is gallbladder issues. So like a gallbladder attack or, even people having to remove their gallbladder. And that's due to the rapid weight loss that you see with these medications. And if you just have rapid weight loss on your own, it's also a risk factor for that. But what is the risk of not losing 100 pounds
I know.
if you're morbidly obese?
Yeah.
That's the question where we can get caught in some of these small details, but we have to really be weighing risks and benefits. And so if you're stuck in the risk, but you're not looking at the benefits, then you're missing the big picture as well. Because the risk of obesity, you have a 1.5 to a 3.5 increased risk of postmenopausal breast cancer, colon cancer, esophageal cancer. I mean, the cancer list is huge. And then people get really stuck up on the medullary thyroid cancer with Ozempic, which that was viewed in rodents. It hasn't been viewed statistically significant in humans yet at all, period, hard stop. And, when you look at humans, we have different C cell concentrations in the thyroid compared to rodents. We have different receptor sensitivity than rodents, and we just don't have that data yet. So if you're saying, well, I don't want to take it because of the cancer risk, but for sure having obesity, you have up to a 3.5-fold increased risk for a ton of certain cancers. So then that doesn't feel like a proper weight of the ratio of benefit to risk. So
I hear you.
Kind of pick it apart with each of these issues. And then it's an individual's decision. I have people that are just like, I don't like medication, period, hard stop, it's a belief. Okay,
Let's work. Let's figure it out.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's your decision.
Sure. It's very personal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. We had a client just the other day, asking us like, should I take it? Should I not take it? So desperate. And I said, listen, take it or not take it. You still have to figure out your new routine
Totally.
of living every day, at least 4 days a week, exercise.
Yeah.
Aerobic, resistance training, stretching. Like you've got to make that part of your life no matter what. And so people need to exercise more when they're taking a GLP-1 agonist, weight loss medication. Do they need to focus on strength training more, would you say?
No, the same. Yeah, because like I said, I don't think that 10%, because you're looking at one study at that far range there. So I view the muscle loss with these meds versus out them the same. It's just dependent on the mode you're using to actually measure these things. And then the study, and it's going to be your population specific, right? So you can see way bigger losses. If you look at my patients with lean muscle mass loss versus, some of these clinics that are just handing out these meds without doing any education, there's going to be a way bigger change, right?
Well, what do you think about those clinics who are just handing it out? Because I know a handful of people, I've seen a handful of people who are taking these drugs, right? They maybe are doing it via Zoom, or they're getting on TikTok off of these TikTok influencers who are just like promoting it, private labeling it. And I'm curious, like, do you think the way they're going about it is better than doing it naturally? Because you're special. You are talking about fitness and exercise and whole foods, but majority of people taking it, from what I see, they don't have great people like you in their corner.
They want it fast, they want it cheap, and they want it now.
They're getting sick, and they look sick.
And I mean, I think that's a tough question to answer. But I think, it's the first time ever that we've seen the obesity curve flatten. just recently. So we've had our
True.
first time where we're seeing this flattening of the curve. And I think a part of that is likely some of these medications. I think there's other things involved as well. So I think just getting these meds in the hands of people who need them, because there's going to be some people who aren't going to do any of the other things.
Mm-hmm.
And are they better off taking this medication and reducing all of their other risks? I do think that that's the case. Now, what you're talking about too is compounding, which is like a separate kind of layer to this whole picture. And then we have ethics involved as well. So it becomes like really a nuanced conversation that I'm frankly just not prepared to have today.
Oh, good.
Because there's so many layers to it. And it's one of those that I know like 2 months later, I'd be like, dude, why'd you even have that? Like there's so many other things that we should discuss with that. But I think that a lot of the times it comes back to risk-benefit ratio. And if somebody is not ready yet for whatever reason to exercise and to eat well, they may still be of benefit to take the medication and lose all this weight and reduce the risk, because we have to look at healthcare spending dollars too. So health is also an economic crisis.
It is.
Right? And so, we have people that are, reliant on the government for paying for their bills and things like that. And are we going to have less spending if we can reduce the risk for all-cause mortality and morbidity? Yes. And we're going to improve this person's life too. And then, the compounding piece where we're going to likely see more stuff come out about compounding pharmacies who are not doing their due diligence, because these are injectable medications for the most part right now. And that's I have people ask me all the time, can I just do the compounded because it's cheaper? And there's a whole conversation about finances with these meds. And, but you also run the risk of like a severe infection if you have a compounding pharmacy who's not doing their due diligence, and there's contamination. We've had outbreaks from compounding pharmacies in the past with injectables, with meningitis that led to the deaths of people. And so I personally give the spiel to all my patients, and I say, you choose though, because it's your risk. I don't have the power to tell you no if you think that that's a better option for you. So we need to lower the medication costs safely for people. But yeah, that was my nuanced answer of your your quick
And
question.
then so that's interesting. So you say we should lower the cost, and I think that's interesting because I'm like thinking walking is free. I'm thinking, starting to learn how to plant if you have a house. A lot of people have a house. You could plant in your garden. So I'm thinking these things are cheaper. I do think buying a head of cabbage is cheaper than going to McDonald's. I mean, it's like 99 cents or $2 for an organic piece of cabbage. And I just think, like, why isn't that our first call to action? I know it's your first call to action, but for most people, it's not. So I'm curious on your opinion about that.
Yeah, well, I think that if it was, we wouldn't have the obesity epidemic.
Okay.
Right? And it's like, why do we make certain food choices? There's so much psychology that comes back to this question. And mental health. We have a mental health epidemic in the United States, period.
Yeah.
And, you can tell somebody who's depressed, just be happy.
Right.
They're going to say, F you. Like,
right. Well, I was in that place. I was 320 pounds, depressed and anxious, but, I did go outside. And when I went outside and I put my feet in the grass, I was like, wow, okay, this is kind of like an enlightening experience, right? Because it was just like this connection to earth that I feel that we need. And so when I ate the vegetables, it was gross at first because I was addicted to the processed food, but eventually it got better. And I wasn't in therapy. I wasn't on antidepressants. I wasn't on anti-anxiety medication. I just started doing these things, eating whole foods, walking. I just started walking up my really steep hill, and it was painful. And it was a character building experience, but I wasn't on any drugs or anything. I tried HCG injections. But you say like, I agree with you. Like if you told me to just go eat vegetables, I did tell you to F off actually.
Yes,
I
many
was
times.
like, I don't want to do that. But then once I actually did it, I solved my problem without needing to go those lengths.
Yes, they
I
offered you
tried.
drugs.
Yes, they did offer me drugs. Yes, I did try the HCG injection. I tried the keto and paleo, but I just feel that there's this deeper answer that we could all find. if it was offered more. Because when I went to the doctor, they were like, just eat some grains, eat some bread. And I was already 320 pounds, so that wasn't really going to help me. So I'm not saying all doctors are like this, but I know there's a handful that are just like, here, take this, instead of like getting to that root problem. Yeah. So I just wonder about that.
Yeah, I think if it was that simple of just eat more vegetables and eat less calories, we wouldn't have the epidemic. And I think it's easy, like you have an N of one story, right? And it worked for you. And like you had a huge transformation, which is incredible. But who's to say Tom from Ohio, who's tried that and failed so many times, shouldn't take a medication that's going to get him there? Mm-hmm. Like I think that we need to take some of our own inherent biases out of it. I mean, I come from a background of like, in naturopathic medicine, one of the tenets is use the most natural means possible. And for myself, I've thrown that tenet out the window. And it was one that I really believed in at one point in my life. And then I really had to look at my own bias and say, what makes natural better and what even is natural? Because GLP-1 is a natural compound that we produce in our intestinal cells, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some of the medications we use, I mean, most of the medications we use are from nature. We've just taken out the one compound because we don't want the toxicity of the other compounds or whatever it is, right? We want to regulate the dose so we don't die from overdose. And so, you know, I think that we need to start to say, like, my story is one story, but then there's all of these other people that have tried and failed and tried again and failed, and we don't understand obesity yet. We're still learning about it. And so that's why I view it as a tool, and it's not a panacea, but it is such a valuable tool. And it's, I mean, I have people in my practice that their lives are changed, and they had depression that was suicidal, and they are now going out to gatherings and meeting new people, and they hadn't met somebody new in like years, right? Like their lives are completely transformed.
That's
so
amazing.
It's really easy to see when you see these transformations, like these are a powerful tool, and for us to, you know, say like people shouldn't take them, I think is really inhibiting a lot of people who could potentially have transformative events.
And how do you feel about, like, most of the people who take these drugs, semaglutide, Ozempic, tirzepatide, Zepbound, the stats are showing that 88% regain the weight, and then 71%, gain even more weight. Then they regain, and then they gain even more. So what are your kind of thoughts on that?
Because you're looking at a population of people who naturally was really resistant to weight loss in the beginning.
Okay.
Right? So, because there's people that have gained weight and lost it, and these aren't the people that are really going after these medications. And of course there are, right? But when you're looking at the vast majority of people, especially in the studies, when you're looking at some of these studies, it's like prediabetes, diabetes, morbid obesity, chronic kidney disease, right? Like sick people, and they've already tried all of the things. And so their rates of weight regain are going to be higher no matter what, period. Okay. And if you look at stats of weight regain with any form of weight loss, they're super high. I don't know them off the top of my head, but they're really high.
Yeah,
it's
I noticed.
hard to keep weight off, period.
Yeah.
So you're going to see that with any medication around obesity. It's much different than something like a fungal infection, like rates of relapse of, I'm trying to think, like candidiasis. When there's psychology involved and trauma involved and all of these other things, especially our food environment too. We have so much access to really delicious food, but I don't think that means that the meds are bad.
Do you think that those people who are regaining the weight and even more should even go on it if it's actually kind of causing them to worsen their obesity?
Yeah, because you can, number one, you can keep some of these people on these medications at a low dose, a maintenance, whatever that maintenance dose is, and then you've taken them from a huge risk for heart disease, metabolic disease, diabetes, cancer, like, right, that whole list of things, and you've taken that off their plate, and then they just have to be on a low dose of a medication to sustain it. That's not the end of the world.
For the rest of their life.
Potentially, yeah.
I mean, that
But potentially
seems,
not. I have a bunch of patients who go off of them and they maintain it because they're able to maintain a lot of the diet, exercise, lifestyle things as well. So it's not a hard rule. Like I have people in both of those camps, but would I rather somebody who, started off at 350 pounds at 5'3", who's now down to 180 and is no longer pre-diabetic, has low LDL-C, no,
That's amazing.
No more fatty liver, like
Yeah.
the whole, and is
No,
not
that's so-
depressed anymore.
That's
la, la, la,
amazing.
la, la.
Yeah.
No more PCOS. Like these are all things that I've seen in my practice.
Yeah.
Or would I rather her there on a low dose of a medication or back up to 350 pounds? Easiest question.
Right. No, I can totally see that. I just feel like sometimes, like especially when we lower the cost and we popularize it and make it easy access, especially for children, I do worry about like long-term implications of, yes, the benefits are massive. Nobody wants to get cancer or PCOS, but we also don't know what the long-term risks are, especially when a population under the age of 12. Because we're like right on the precipice of it. Like if they spent $4 billion not giving Ozempic to everybody that needs it, but implementing nutrition and exercise programs in schools and like more education and accountability and support, and I just feel like that might be a better solution than the allocation of these federal dollars to support this pharmaceutical intervention.
Well, I don't know enough about the financials of these medications, but there's a huge issue with why these medications are so expensive in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
So these drug companies are making a lot of money on these medications.
Yeah.
I know Nature Journal said $5 a month. They would still be making a profit if it was $5 a month.
Right. So we need, that's like that. We don't, and I don't know enough about it to speak on it, but there's an issue with the pharma piece of this, which hopefully can be addressed, and it's above my pay grade. But I don't think that, I still think that we want to make them more affordable because there's a bunch of people that would benefit and greatly reduce their overall risk if they were on these medications, had access to them, and didn't have to spend their life savings on them. And are there potential risks that we don't know about yet? Yes, there are, but we have to go on what we do know now. And right now, for a lot of people, the benefits far outweigh the risks. And that's just how we look at anything in medicine, right? Like, I would even say like the COVID vaccine for a small group of people, like young men, right? Where is their risk of getting COVID or potential myocarditis higher? And but we keep learning things, and that's when we start to make changes. But you can't, like, I don't think it's helpful to say, well, what if? I think we just have to wait and see what if. Because right now what we're seeing is rates of heart disease are going down. I mean, we're seeing things that are potentially rates of Alzheimer's disease are going down because of the anti-inflammatory effects of these medications. Like there's a potential that these medications have a much wider scope than just obesity, diabetes, that they could be potentially longevity medications. And that's the potential. So we don't know yet. So I wouldn't take it yet. Like I don't think we should. And that's where, in the integrative health space, you see the opposite happen, where people are injecting themselves with peptides that only have rodent data, that have absolutely like no human trials on them. Talk about risk. Like for me, I'm like, whoa, risks way outweigh benefits. And these are some of the same people that are saying, well, then we shouldn't take Ozempic. And it's like, we got to take a step back and really
Look at the data.
look at the data that we have. And if more data comes out, we pivot. And you do that all the time in medicine.
Right. Absolutely.
I love the saying pills don't build skills. And I really want to know what your thoughts are on that, because in many cases, certain pills don't build skills. But I'm wondering what you think about that in this scenario, because I think weight loss is a very nuanced conversation. And I do believe that pills don't build skills in this scenario. And I would love to know your thoughts on that.
But what if the pill reduces food noise? Could you potentially start to build a skill of focusing, redirecting your focus onto the things that you want to hear in your head?
Well, then
Same with OCD, right?
I do love that idea. Yeah. But most people are lazy and just want it fast and cheap.
Then I wonder, what about eating foods that boost our natural GLP-1s? Because there are...
Well, let's talk about it. This is a good one.
Okay, so what do you mean it doesn't work? Because I've drank green tea before, and it really suppresses my hunger. I've eaten cruciferous vegetables, and they definitely reduce my hunger. I've eaten protein, not hungry for 4 hours. So to me, wow, I'm not hungry. Same thing that GLP-1 does.
But you had to rehabilitate your hippocampal pathways. You had to rehabilitate your gut microbiome before that was available to you. And it wasn't in the first 50 pounds that happened. I just want to call that out. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. But so GLP-1, it's a peptide, right, that's secreted by the intestines, has a very short half-life. And so well, let me go through this first, where if you're eating it, that's why we're really working on why it has to be injectable, right? Because you have to have a longer half-life of this medication to actually have sustained effects. Because if you have 2 seconds of GLP-1, you're not going to lose weight. 2 seconds is not enough to suppress appetite for your whole day, right? So all the foods that you mentioned have benefits to them, and we should eat more of them, like broccoli, like sulforaphane, you have high fiber, right? Anti-inflammatory effects, so many benefits to that. And those can all help you lose weight. Just having a higher fiber diet will help you lose weight. We know that. Green tea has a bunch of anti-inflammatory effects, is a superfood, reduces the risk for colon cancer, right? Like polyps, like all of these things. Love it. It has caffeine in it. Caffeine is an appetite suppressant.
Right.
We know that. People have used caffeine for years to lose weight. It's effective. It's not as effective as GLP-1s. So it's not apples to apples here, and it doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, can you eat all those things in a healthy diet that can help you lose weight? Of course, but if somebody is morbidly obese and has tried a whole foods diet and has failed, then just to tell them, well, just eat more broccoli, I think potentially you're way more increasing their risk of morbidity or mortality than reducing it.
Did they try it long enough? Did they eradicate all of the other things in their life and that were causing this addiction that they're suffering from, or the debilitation in their cells, in their mitochondria, in their gut microbiome, now also in their brains and their taste buds? Like, there's a full metabolic breakdown in the human body that wasn't there 100 years ago from a number of factors that we identified earlier in the conversation. But I just wonder, I'm not saying that they're lazy, but I mean, we've seen, I believe in nature, that principle that you founded your interest in medicine on. And they asked me to give Penelope the medication, but you give the SSRI and then then you gain 40 pounds, and then you have to take the Ozempic to lose it, and then you need other drugs. I mean, it's like the perfect business model. I'm a capitalist. I believe in the American way, but it's when you really break it down, like you see the plan. And how it's working out. And I think that's why we create some resistance around, like, hey, what kind of regulations can we create so that we can ensure that people are fulfilling on those lifestyle choice changes, so that they're not a burden on our economy, because they're not great in the workforce, right? There's more sick days. They're a burden for their families, for long-term health, for everything. So not that they're lazy, but I do wonder if they've tried it long enough to really get the natural systems in the body back on track.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with anything that you say. I mean, I think we all here agree with the foundations that eating well and exercising are essential. And I don't know any good obesity doctor that doesn't agree with that. And the problem is just bigger than that. And there's people that have tried it as long as they possibly can and have not gotten the results yet. And I think it's also going to be dependent on the population that you've worked with. And so just like I've worked with hundreds of people who have tried to lose weight. And you see these people who have tried year after year, and they are eating a whole foods diet. They are not eating processed food. They are exercising. A lot of these people will fall into a category of fit fat, where they're overweight, obese, but they're actually very fit, and they could potentially be in better shape than somebody who's skinny fat.
I definitely fall into that category. I understand that. It's like a metabolic dysfunction, right? They've got something going on. Yeah.
And, I even have a few patients in mind where we tried everything. Like, it was before I knew enough about hormone replacement therapy, and we, changed their hormones, like all that stuff. And, yeah, so I think once you see enough people who have been so stuck, and then you see them unstuck and their life has changed, where you're like, whoa, these are powerful tools.
Really opens up your mind and heart.
It opens up your mind, totally.
So you come from a functional nutritional background, like me, like, we're totally into it. I'm so into it. And one of the things that I was learning was that it tells your brain it's full, frankly stuffed. And then it creates a kind of like starvation. Because you're in a calorie deficit, which is a good thing, right? We know that from longevity studies that calorie restriction is a great thing to do as you age. But starvation is challenging. Like long-term starvation is going to cause like tooth decay. It's going to cause, hair falling out. It's going to cause like major issues to have that level of nutrient deficiency over time. Because I think I saw one of your videos, you were saying like you don't really believe in fasting, especially like juice cleanses and things like that. But sometimes people are like misusing intermittent fasting and things like that, which I would completely agree with. And I spent years doing that kind of stuff.
Me too.
And so I think I really damaged myself doing it, frankly. And so I just wonder if we're making the problem worse long term when we think about the idea of starvation in and of itself and its long term implications.
Well, these medications shouldn't be used with a severe low-calorie diet. Like that shouldn't. Are you going to drastically reduce your calories? Absolutely, but you also have to lose weight. And so this is part of where the education piece is really important, but that's going to be with any weight loss in general. You cannot be on these meds and go on a 400-calorie diet. I've seen that so many times, people not on GLP-1s. So, you don't want to do that, but you don't have to with these medications. So my patients on these medications are eating fruits, vegetables, a lean protein, good fats, and are some of them not at times? Of course, but and I had really shitty food last night when I got home from the airport at 11 p.m., right? So we have to have flexibility for all humans. Yeah. And
I agree with that. Yeah. And if you don't have that flexibility, that rigidity can also cause major issues.
Huge issues. I mean, that's one of the roots of eating disorders is over restriction and orthorexia.
Totally. And there's that fine line between getting educated and not obsessing. And people who have eating disorders or who find themselves being morbidly obese oftentimes have that OCD tendency anyway, whichever direction it goes in, right? That pendulum just swings. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that I see is that we're stepping over looking at the root issue. And really getting to the wisdom that it unveiled for me, that it unveiled for you, that unfortunately my mom was on a journey, but it got the best of her. I'm sure she learned a lot along the way, but I think her extreme dieting may have caused her demise. Ultimately, she died of appendicitis, which is so strange, but she couldn't recover from it because of the morbid obesity. Right. Yeah, so it was really tragic. So I just get excited about that aspect of it, just from my background and the revelations that our clients have found in our support group. We offer education, accountability, and support, and that there's always this kind of aha moment where there's no turning back. They can never forget the way they feel, and it's just they're free. And that freedom, I think you're also referencing like these clients that couldn't break through, finally broke through with the GLP-1s, and then now are on their way to a maintenance dose. But I don't want to be on any pharmaceutical for the rest of my life.
Yes.
It's just me.
And I wonder, like, what happens if, like, the world goes into some crazy scenario where we don't have access to these drugs anymore? What are all those people going to do who are heavily relying on it and who don't have amazing doctors like you? My heart goes out to them, and I want them to learn those tools that you learn from a natural weight loss journey, because I learned so much, and the girls in our group have learned so much, and our past clients have learned so much from using nature and using their bodies and working out instead of going to a cheeseburger. Have you seen the Johan Nori's book on Magic Pill?
No.
He takes Ozempic. He's taken it for almost 2 years now. And in his book, he talks about how he'll take Ozempic, but he still goes to KFC and eats a bucket of chicken. He just doesn't have as much. And like, there's such a large group of people in that group. And those are the people that I'm like, I want you guys to learn and feel the freedom that Whole Foods gives you, that muscle, lean muscle gives you, that strength training gives you, because these are things that help our body and help us not be as hungry without needing to rely on a pharmacy.
I think if we hear kind of your arguments, my arguments, it gets to the point, in my opinion, this is a yes and conversation where it's like, should we focus on whole foods and educating people on how to eat better and exercise? Yes. And do these medications potentially, not in my mind, do these medications help improve people's health, morbidity, mortality risks? Yes. So for me, it's a yes and scenario. It's not a which one is right case. And I think most docs in this space would agree with that. I don't think anybody is saying just give the meds, we don't need the exercise and lifestyle. Like if you go to obesity conferences, like most of what we're talking about is exercise, nutrition, lifestyle, and because we've been talking about that for the last how many years, and the obesity rates rise and rise and rise.
Yeah, but Dr. Mary, the medical practice is not set up to hold your patients accountable, and you educate them to the best of your ability. But let's face it, not just you. Every private practice is set up where you have X amount of minutes per patient and you do the best you can outside of that. So I get that medical doctors' hands are tied to a certain degree. Nutritionists may or may not be covered by insurance, right? Health coaches haven't found their way into affordable care, either in insurance companies and or in private practice. So we've got like this really interesting moment in time where we have a sick care system that hopefully MAHA will transition into a well care system, but I don't hear enough conversations about what a education and accountability partner's role is in this equation, because I think the reason why we haven't seen it budge, knowing exercise and nutrition are a piece of it, is because we haven't had a relationship or even an AI model that will work. I think we're close. I think it's possible, but I just don't see the business model is set up for it. And it's not your fault.
Totally. So I spend an hour with people. So
Well, that's a lot of time.
It's a lot of time.
On average, they spend, I think, 14 to 17 minutes.
Yeah. So there are doctors in private practice, and it has to be cash pay because our system is not set up insurance, that are spending plenty of time with patients, and still people are stuck, right? So I don't think that that's going to be the solution. Is it going to drastically change things? Absolutely. And again, this is a yes and. I don't think there's anyone that disagrees with, we need to fix our healthcare system, and way above my pay grade. It's the more you get into it, the more complex it becomes. You have insurance, you have pharma, you have the government, you have all of these different layers, and yeah, I think it's a big issue. What was that?
Oh my gosh, it's crazy when you think about it. It's big. It's really, really big. And we're all playing our little part. And yet I feel like the solution is it's right there and we can we a hold of it. But I still believe in nature, above and beyond everything. I think nature puts us back in our place immediately when we get out of line. We have earthquakes here, we have storms. It's powerful. So I really believe in that.
What about GLP-1s, since their nature?
Yeah, I think we should naturally use our belief in the natural healing mechanisms in the body, that we can overcome our genetics outside of maybe two anomalies, BRCA1 and 2, to really overcome our genetic predisposition. And I think that Penelope and I, we have to work very hard.
Yeah.
And
why do we think that BRCA1 and 2, which are genetics, right? So those are genes that are dictating cancer risk. Why do you think that is more important than obesity genetics?
Because I believe that they can be altered. I don't think that BRCA2, for example, is alterable. I think the way your body handles estrogen and how it's metabolizing it, how it's using it, is not, you can't correct it. You take as much broccoli sprouts as you want, and sulforaphane, and indole 3-carbinol, but it's not going to actually change what's happening in your body and your predisposition to cancer.
Yeah.
And so even though we might have the fat gene, which we do, Penelope on both sides, me on both sides, we're still able to beat it.
Right. There's modifiable risk factors that are associated, but you can't change the gene. So there's epigenetics that you can change.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Sure. So that's another layer of it. But then there are genes in obesity that are going to change your BMR, your metabolism, all these things. And yes, is there a potential to reduce your calories low enough and increase exercise high enough to overcome that? Yes, but it's going to be different for each person about how hard that becomes. And then you add on
build our character.
Health,
Let's
right?
build our. I think we should build our character.
I know.
But you're saying
and.
mental.
Yes,
and you are very skilled in understanding the gut microbiome, which is a field of science that's coming into a whole new existence. Going to your GI internist is going to be a different experience than coming to you and looking at IBS situations, flatulence, constipation, chronic bloating. And so would you consider yourself an expert in all things gut microbiome and whatnot?
Sector of it, mostly chronic GI issues, but specifically the functional GIs, so disorders of the gut-brain interaction I know a lot about. And I've gone through the journey myself as well, so I have that viewpoint from it. And it's a really interesting subset of kind of conditions that I treat, and there's again layers to it, but we can talk about it.
It's so interesting. We find that a lot of women who are losing weight at around, some of them are closer to 300 pounds, and they lose 50 to 60 pounds, and all of a sudden they hit constipation, even on a whole foods diet, eating tons of fiber. And we're like, whoa, what's going on here? It's just fascinating. And I don't understand that. I'd love to learn more about it, just from a personal perspective and professional perspective. And I have a sneaking suspicion that when you mess with the gut microbiome, you're only going to have a cascade of negative implications long term. And with your expertise in this area, knowing that these weight loss medications are potentially permanently adjusting the gut microbiome and the gut flora, and the whole host of gastrointestinal upsets that it causes, everything from constipation to diarrhea to, what was it, rectal bleeding, but no, it was rectal incontinence, as well as gastric paralysis, as well as, so there was this
gastroparesis, chronic acid reflux, gastric emptying disorders, bacterial overgrowth, chronic malabsorption. I mean, what else? Inflammatory bowel conditions.
Like that's a whole host.
Permanent gut flora changes, 38%.
That's the big one. That's the big one that worries me, is the permanent gut flora changes.
Severe bloating, 47% chronic cases. Uncontrollable urgency, 41% report.
I mean, those are the people who usually get off it in a couple of weeks, but...
Well, so with these meds, GI side effects are the most common thing that we'll see. So nausea is number one, easily by far. And so when you look at studies like you did in terms of those numbers, those are going to be anybody who had nausea throughout any point in the study, throughout any duration. They have to mark it down. They could have had it for one day, went away, they feel great the rest of the time on the medication. They're still going to be in that percentile. And that's, especially for nausea, that's usually what we see, is that nausea is very, very common in the beginning of these medications because of the gastric slowing that happens. And most people, if they stick with the med, the nausea will resolve within weeks of taking it. So it's very common. It's a known side effect. Some people will say, well, the nausea is actually inducing the weight loss because you're so nauseous you're not eating, and that's not true, because we have people that aren't nauseous and they're losing the same amount of weight as the people that were nauseous.
Okay.
So that one, you just coach people around it, where you say, nausea is super common. Most people, it's going to resolve, if you keep taking it. And there's going to be some people that can't tolerate these meds. That's with every medication.
Sure.
Literally most medications, there's going to be people that doesn't work, can't tolerate them. Diarrhea can definitely be a side effect. Again, most of the time resolves on its own. Some people have to stop taking it.
But why do they get diarrhea?
Because of the changes in the GI motility that can happen. Constipation is very common with these medications, which makes more sense because it's slowing the gastric emptying. So you'll also see constipation. But you can look at any medication list. It's going to have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea.
That's true.
Somebody in the study had it, right?
That's true.
So we have to really say, because there's an interesting study that came out, I think it was Surmount or something that I was just reading, one of the trials of tirzepatide, where nausea, most common side effect they found in the study, but then they had a placebo arm, which was just nutrition, diet, exercise, lifestyle, and I think they had a placebo injectable. And they had nausea.
Interesting.
In that group, 12%, which is not low. And there was no way that the placebo was causing the nausea. It's the psychogenic effect that placebos have. So we also know that a percentage of people in the in the tirzepatide, the GLP-1 groups, is going to be due to placebo as well. But we know that that's a common thing.
But are you concerned, just intuitively, about that it's changing the gut the flora in such a way? Because, you don't want slow digestion, right? That's not good. We want a strong digestive fire. We want to be able to assimilate and digest our foods well. I mean, it's a foundation for our immune system, for our health, for our mental well-being. I mean, so I'm just intuitively, not that you're speaking against it per se, but are you intuitively concerned about the potential in these gut flora changes?
Yeah.
I mean, you're way more connected to it than we are.
Totally. Yeah. No, I'm not, because there's also, I think you're kind of forecasting that there's going to be a negative consequence.
I am. Yeah.
There could be a really great consequence to these medications too, and we'd be guessing to know which one it is.
It's a slow digestion, malabsorption, starvation. I know, but I mean, these are all gut.
We're not worried related. So starvation is not a concern for
nutrient deficiency over time.
No, I mean, that would mean nobody should lose weight because you're going to go into a calorie deficit.
Or are you absorbing the nutrients with the gut microbiome changes?
Yeah, so we know what signs of malnutrition are in terms of some of the things that you mentioned, but if you have somebody who's not absorbing, they're going to have diarrhea that doesn't resolve. No doctor is keeping people on these medications that have diarrhea that's not resolving because you have a whole host of potential side effects from just the diarrhea, right? So these people that are staying on these meds long term, the diarrhea is resolving. They're not having profuse watery diarrhea, which would potentially indicate malabsorption. We wouldn't keep those people on these medications.
Okay.
So I'm not worried about that in that case.
So they need to be. They really need to be followed by a
Totally
medical
need to be
doctor.
followed. And any doctor that's reputable in this space would say you need to be followed as well. And in terms of the gut microbiome, again, I've studied the gut microbiome for years now. I think it's fascinating, and we still don't know a ton about it. Like, we know a lot more than we did.
Yeah.
There's this, it's the tip of the iceberg when we see this. So we still don't even know yet what is the ideal gut microbiome. We cannot answer that question yet. We don't know how much of which bacteria, which archaea should be in there, what ratios for the ideal gut microbiome. Until we know that answer, which I don't think that there is going to be a answer. I think it's going to be like a thumbprint. Like, my thumbprint is no better than Penelope's thumbprint. It's just different. But there's going to be sectors of like, okay, we do know that these ratios have to be kind of closer to here, or that we need this guy around because of the effect on metabolism. We're going to know more than we know right now. And we'll probably get to the FMT place at some point too, which will be exciting. But without knowing those answers yet, we can't say what changes are good or bad for the most part, where we know, of course, if you wipe out the flora and you have an overgrowth of C. difficile and you have pseudomembranous colitis with the diarrhea, that's bad, right? We know that for sure. We know E. coli 0157H7 that causes traveler's diarrhea. We don't like that one. So we know some things, but we don't know yet. And so there's also a potential that we see, like we've seen with these medications many times so far, right? At first, we didn't know their potential for reducing the risk for heart disease. And now in this one, the FLOW trial, the risk for major cardiovascular events was almost 20% lower in the treatment group. And this is in patients with chronic kidney disease, very sick patients. That's a huge reduction.
That's impressive.
It's super impressive.
Do you know how many people were in the flow?
How many people went in that trial? It was actually a bigger trial. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
But that was in chronic kidney disease patients where the endpoints were super strict. Like, people were going really deteriorating in terms of kidney disease. And it didn't just reduce the risk for heart disease, it reduced the risk. So there was a 24% reduced risk for the endpoints, which was going into kidney failure and needing dialysis. 24% reduced risk. That's a huge change in people's lifestyle.
It was because of the weight loss, essentially.
It was a piece of the weight loss, but it's not the whole picture with these medications. So we know, for instance, with osteoarthritis, a big chunk of what people are experiencing there is the weight loss, but then there's this other piece, same with the heart disease piece. It's a chunk of weight loss, but there's also anti-inflammatory effects of these medications.
Yeah.
So
that's huge.
It's huge.
That's like every disease comes from inflammation.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so big.
And so without knowing what effects they're having on the gut microbiome, we can't yet say, are these good or are these bad? And that's one of those things that's watch and wait and we'll see. But there's the potential that we say, damn, these things are doing a really great thing for the gut microbiome.
Do you think we should be giving them to the kids and stuff, though, before we have that data? I don't know. I feel like we're kind of like testing on the American public.
Yes.
And people in Denmark, where Novo Nordisk is located, they're not giving this drug out to everybody.
Novo Nordisk is doing a clinical trial on 6-year-olds. They actually already did it.
But not in Denmark, though.
I don't know where they did it.
Okay.
I just know that they did it. And I don't want them doing that on our 6-year-olds.
Yeah, I get that. I get it. And like I said, I'm not a ped specialist, and I just don't feel...
Yeah. So it's so interesting. You mentioned the heart disease is getting better with these drugs, and I find it interesting because when I was looking at the studies from the SELECT trial, and they said there's an increased risk of blood clots, heart rhythm abnormalities, severe hypertensive episodes, that 31% develop heart rhythm abnormalities. So I'm just wondering, like, is it worth it with 35% experiencing blood pressure spikes, 28% reported episodes of chest pain? So is that normal to feel those things?
So I would really want to look at what study those came from, because we don't see those in clinical practice.
Okay.
So yeah, if I was having patients, we're having huge increases in, because then you wouldn't see reductions in rates of heart disease, right? So I would need to actually look at that trial, because that's definitely not what we're seeing in clinical practice.
I know. I thought that was weird. I was like, wait, if it's helping heart disease, why is it causing heart problems? It's just, it was interesting.
Do you know what trial that was from?
It says the SELECT trial right here. Severe hypertensive episode source SELECT trial. Cardiovascular SELECT trial. Increased risk of blood clots. Heart rhythm abnormalities, all from the SELECT trial.
And do you know
in
what
2023.
Because
well, yeah,
that's
then the
gonna
percentage right here.
Because you will get, like I said, anything that happens in a trial, they have to mark it down, whether it was causal or just that the patient had a huge risk of clotting anyways and came into the trial and clotted.
Yeah, it showed that 31% of the patients developed heart rhythm abnormalities, and 28% reported episodes of chest pain. 35% experienced blood pressure spikes. 22% had circulation problems. 5% showed changes in their heart valve.
And then what about for the placebo group? Because you always want to compare, because this may, I don't know this one off the top of my head, but if this is a high risk group, you're going to have the same in the placebo and the actually active group, because there's a huge incidence of hypertension in both groups, if that exists, right? Which makes sense. So if you have a group in, for instance, the FLOW trial, really sick people, you're going to get a ton of side effects on the treatment group, but you're also going to get a ton on the placebo group because they're going to match them with.
Either way, though, we wouldn't want that, right?
But that means that you can never study really sick people.
True, but we
Have
wouldn't
to study sick
we
people.
just wouldn't want to give these drugs to people who already have heart problems, per se.
No, we actually probably will be giving them to people with heart
Even
problems
if they've
because it's reducing the risk.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing there is, like, for instance, if I did a study on people who are super sick, morbidly obese, hypertension, you're going to get hypertension in both groups, right? Because they already came in with hypertension. Are you going to see spikes in hypertension? 100%, because these people came in with uncontrolled hypertension in these groups. But you're going to see it on both sides. What you don't want to see is you don't want to see that the treatment group had 40% of people had, uncontrollable hypertension and 2% in the placebo group, and they matched them for their sickness level. That would be shocking.
I wouldn't want to
But
be
if you-
a lab rat for this thing,
But these
for
drugs
weight
have
loss,
been around
for weight loss
a
specifically.
long time.
But for diabetes, but for weight loss specifically, I wouldn't want to.
See, and that's your decision too, right? And I think
True.
Nobody's forcing anybody on these medications. It should be informed consent. But these meds are coming back with potential, like, reducing risk for heart disease, kidney disease, neurodegenerative diseases. So it's one of the ones that if I was in the place of morbid obesity, couldn't do it with diet, exercise, and lifestyle, I personally would go on them.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. I mean, if anyone understands the desperation of obesity, it's us.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's big. It's heavy.
Super.
And it's
super.
consuming.
Yeah.
And I mean, Penelope speaks about it like, well, she says, oh, I love, she says this. She's like, if I knew losing weight would have tasted this good, I would have started a long time ago.
That's true. And then that was my other question in my head. I was like, wait, so why don't, is there an opportunity for doctors around the world to go to their obese clients who've been like, I've tried everything, I've tried all this food, da 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 da. Is there an opportunity for a doctor to say, okay, I know there is a group of awesome people that I think could really help you on your journey, whether it's virtually or in person or whether it's a class or whatever. Is there a possibility for a doctor to be like, I'm going to prescribe you to be to have someone hold you accountable and be there with you every day and remind you and make you take a photo of your food or make you take a photo of your workout so that you can experience more support than I could give you in this hour session or that I could give you in this 15 minutes? Is there a possibility?
It exists. So that's what I do with my patients. So all of my patients who are on Ozempic or any of the GLP-1s are on memberships, which means that they have access to me between all their appointments. So they have portal access. And if you're my patient and you're listening, you've done this with me before, we create SMART goals. So things that are sustainable, right? They're measurable. We have timing, we know. And then I actually act as that person. I say, okay, do you want me to message you on Tuesday or do you want to message me?
Nice.
Some people,
Oh gosh, you're
which way.
busy.
And so that exists, and I've done that for years prior to these GLP-1s with the people, and people still get stuck. So I think
sure.
we just have to,
Balance.
balance it, right?
Yeah.
Where, yes, there is.
There is.
And it's not cheap either to have that kind of touch point with people?
I don't know. Our group is $47 a month.
For now.
But
Yeah.
$97 a month, the difference is not that much. The point is, I feel like that would be such a great stepping point for people. We call it
Totally.
Step It Up, actually, because we help people do that. And I say this because I'm like, there are so many doctors who don't do what you're doing, which is awesome. I love that you're doing that. That I wonder, like, is there a possibility in that system for them to do that? And you're like, yes, totally, 100%. So I almost wonder, should we be, or should doctors, or could everyone around the world kind of implement that system? Like, okay, you've tried the diets, let's try an accountability system. And then if that accountability system fails, and they've tried it for 3-6 months, then, I'm just wondering if you think that's a good idea.
I think that people need a ton of support, and somebody also has to pay for it. So I think, but if we can figure it out, I don't think that I've never met a doctor who doesn't think like health coaches couldn't be beneficial to their patients, for sure. Yeah.
We just got to figure out how to plug it into a fundable model. Yeah, a model that isn't out of pocket. Because right now it's philanthropically funded, but there are literally hundreds of thousands of health coaches that are trained by very reputable institutions. Well coaches, Harvard, Duke, Georgetown. I mean, it's really exciting actually. But they don't have jobs. The insurance company use them like policemen in a way. Like, you got diagnosed with diabetes, are you taking your metformin? And if the patient says no, then they revoke coverage. And that's not necessarily the best use of a health coach, or in the highest and best form of it. That's at least what I know. But I'd love to learn more if anyone has any information about that. I know certain corporations are using them and whatnot, but it's definitely an opportunity. But I still believe that Ozempic, ultimately, especially when it's going to be made cheaper, is going to be stepping over a big value. A big value in terms of self-realization, in terms of long-term health. What's the word I'm looking for? Long-term lifestyle changes that are required just to live a happy, healthy life. And this disconnection from nature, which is part of the problem. We actually just recently saw some research showing that blue light may be causing obesity, which is shocking to think about the metabolic dysfunction based on an excessive amount of blue light, coupled with a sedentary lifestyle, that there are a lot of causes to this that are breaking cycles of nature, and that implementing a solution that, is pharmaceutical, may actually, be stepping over a really valuable reunification, so to say, with nature. It's a little woo to say it like that, but I really believe in the power of sunlight, natural, exercise. Like we found out a few months ago, Penelope found this out, and I was shocked. You lose how much? What was the percentage of weight that you lose through respiration?
It was like 95% or something like that.
I'm like, oh yeah, sweat, urine, feces, skin, maybe a little bit, And she's like, well, I want to know exactly what the percentages are. I'm like, respiration? Like, how is that even possible?
Yeah.
That was fascinating.
It was.
Like, I knew exercise was important, but I didn't realize we lost weight through respiration.
Yeah.
What was the step?
It was like 95% of the fat
it was
you
more in the
lose is
70
through your breath.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Oh, they're talking about the actual metabolic pathways in terms of expelling CO2. But it's not from the act of breathing, which would have, the act of breathing is one of the components that makes up your basal metabolic rate. Like, same with however much it takes to pump blood through your body, right? That's all going to be there.
So it's not directly respiration.
No, it's
through
cellular
CO2.
respiration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You use that word all the time.
I know. I'm like, wait, how could that even be
You're
possible?
always like cellular respiration. You just use that word a lot.
I do?
Yes,
Oh.
you do.
Yeah, I can never see myself very clearly. It's hard behind my own eyes
I
to
have
do
a
that.
fun stat, though, about the blue light.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
please.
Yes.
So the Nurses' Health Study, they adjusted for age, exercise level, dietary factors, and every 2-hour increment spent watching TV was associated with an increased risk of obesity of 23%, as well as a diabetes risk increase of 14%.
Hold up.
It's wild. And
That's amazing. Wait, 23%.
yeah.
And wait, with 23% increase with every hour?
2 hours, which is going to plateau, and I didn't get the whole study, so it's not, indefinitely, but just taking that one stat right there, just even 2 hours, I think my hypothesis is some of that blue light data is actually due to sedentary behaviors that are associated with anything blue light related. So another interesting thing that I went down the rabbit hole one time was, light and sleep. And so we often talk about blue light and sleep and wearing the amber glasses at night, which I think could be helpful. But I found a really interesting study that showed that the blue light association was more of an association because scrolling on the phone is so activating to the brain that even if you take out the blue light and put the blockers on, that there's still more of a disruption in your circadian rhythm with just the act of scrolling.
Interesting.
Versus the light alone. So
Oh,
they
okay.
both have a layer there. But,
And or a drama or, some kind of engaging television thing. Interesting.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that idea. Yeah. Well, we can agree to disagree.
Yeah, we can.
Wait, but
Yeah.
I have a really interesting question for you because
Okay.
I'm pretty sure you're aware of this. But the FDA issued Ozempic as the highest black box warning for risks including thyroid cancer, organ failure, and so I was wondering, like, does that ever concern you when you look at it, when you see that the FDA did that? Is that like, oh, okay, I should be careful, or like, I'm just wondering.
Well, so black box warnings, what they're saying there is just like that's the highest level of warning we don't have. We don't have like a double black diamond box. Like it's just black box, and that's what there is. So, and a lot of meds have black box warnings for it. The black box warning, I think, is going to get taken down for that's talking about the medullary thyroid disease, or cancer, We talked about that in the beginning, but the medullary thyroid carcinomas that they're looking at are cancerous C-cell tumors that were found in rodents when they tested these medications. They haven't seen that yet in humans. There's the potential, and so that the recommendation now, which is what we still go by for sure, is if you have any history, personal or family, that you don't go on these medications.
I love that.
And so that's just how we practice. And the medullary thyroid tumors specifically are pretty rare, so it doesn't exclude a whole bunch of people. But if you look at the actual physiology of that specific type of cancer in humans, thyroid in terms of C-cell composition is different than rodents. So we don't even fully know if that is going to be a causal thing or if an association or what it is in actual humans.
So it doesn't concern you because it's
We're
really
not
just in
treating
rats.
people with any family history of it anyways, and the rodent data.
Okay.
Yeah. And is there a potential that everything's going to have a benefit and a risk? So it's just
true.
It's just about weighing that.
Although I feel like walking doesn't have that many risks unless you're clumsy.
Yeah, but you
Or
can't-
eating fiber and protein, There's not many risks in that.
But nobody's saying don't do those.
True.
I'm saying 100% you should do those.
No, I know you are.
And
I know
every
you are.
day, and day after day after day after
All the
day.
time.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I know humans are kind of like risks, but I'm just like, oh, if we could live a life that has less risks,
Yeah.
why wouldn't we?
Yeah.
You know?
But what do you guys think about rapamycin, the longevity drugs?
I don't know a ton about them.
No, okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't speak to them with like a level of intelligence.
Yeah, I'm
but
trying
tell
to
me,
think.
like, what
Okay,
about?
what if we don't even go there?
What do they
This is-
do?
This is just like a thought provoker, right? We don't have to. It wasn't about the actual medication.
Oh, okay.
But what about like NAD IVs? Do you guys do any of that, or do you do any like
done it.
ozone therapy or like anything like that?
Yeah, I've done it before. Yeah, red light. We do red light.
Sit in the
light.
sun.
We do far infrared saunas. We do
Okay.
cold plunging.
Maybe even red light. So red light is a spectrum, right? And we know that it has like a therapeutic effect. There is potential because we haven't actually. This is a great one. We haven't had like red light devices around that long. Like back in 1980, nobody's doing red light therapy.
Right. I think. Well, NASA started their studies. I thought in the 70s around with red light, and they used it to
But at
grow food
commercial
in.
level, at this, how we're using them now.
Right.
This is a new occurrence. There could be potential that red light increases the risk of certain types of skin cancers.
I don't use it as much. I really don't.
There's a potential, right? I'm not saying it
Sure.
does.
Sure.
But there's
Right,
for sure
but we don't
potential
know.
that
But we're not.
We don't know because it
injecting
hasn't
our
been-
bodies with
People
red
are doing
light.
that all the time with peptides and NAD
But I'm not like
and all these things.
I'm not pro peptide.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think it's funny where sometimes we weigh things differently if it
Yeah.
has like a pharma label on it. But in the wellness space, people are injecting themselves and infusing and doing all these things and not thinking about. I think about risk no matter where it comes from.
Of course.
Same with supplements. Like, people are taking a bazillion supplements. I'm like, you have no idea what's actually in that because of the
Right.
regulations around supplements.
Absolutely true.
So
Yeah, it's true.
100%.
this game.
I
It
agree with
is.
you. No, I totally agree with you. I
It
do.
is. But at the end of the day, we all want to be happy, healthy, and free.
Yes.
And to me, that's the goal. That's the goal of life. And there's nothing more valuable than that, actually. You can't buy it.
Totally.
And you have to create it. And GLP-1s, it sounds like you've seen a huge impact, changing people's lives. We are worried about it stepping over the most valuable experience that we've ever had. Although I have to say that if I could have given my mom her life back so that she could have been a grandma to you, and it was because of GLP-1, I would be like all for it, right? That they weren't available then.
Right.
And she did fen-phen and all the other things because she was totally desperate.
Yeah.
I just get worried about the cheapening of it, the lack of restrictions around, how long people get it, how they're using it, if they're being followed by a physician, because we were even offered money
Yes, that's true.
to private label it and
Totally.
sell it to our clientele, and we declined.
They offered a lot of money to us too.
Yes.
It wasn't just like a little bit. It was like, no,
there's a
I'll
lot of
pay
money
you.
in these drugs. For
Yeah,
sure.
like we could be making bank right now.
Yeah.
But we decided we declined because of our ethical concerns about its infancy. Maybe in 10 years we'll feel differently about it. But that was one of the reasons why I would have this conversation with you, because we're still learning.
Yeah.
And
we all are.
you're like right there in the trenches with us, helping to reverse this chronic epidemic. I look at it as an epidemic. I don't know if it could be really considered that, but I look
is,
at
for
it.
sure.
And it's leading to so many other chronic preventable diseases.
Yeah.
Penelope, did you have any other questions before we wrap and let people know where they can find her?
I think I've ran my questions through.
Yeah.
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 Do you?
No, but do you have any questions for us?
Yeah.
I love what you ladies are doing. I mean, this is why I think it's yes and. It's like you're doing amazing work, emphasizing all the right things in terms of helping people exercise more, eat more. So, yeah, love it.
Eat better, because health and flavor have to go hand in hand.
Yes. So true.
We celebrate with food. We still do.
Love
Yes.
it.
But food that makes you free in your belly and in your mind and in your cells, hopefully. I mean, at least that's what we have found in our clients.
Yeah.
So if people want to join your membership, if they want to find out more about your practice and your partners, because I know you have other doctors in your practice as well who are doing great work. You guys are such examples of your work. You guys look very healthy and fit and wholehearted, because I can tell you really care.
Really care. Yeah. And I mean, there's a gold rush right now with these medications, right? That's like a piece of this with the compounded piece. If you're like us, we don't get paid at all to prescribe these medications, not even a penny. And so we really care. That's why we're here. And yeah, Modern Med is my website. It's modrnmed.com. And my Instagram is at dr.marypardee. And I give away a ton of free health advice, thoughts on Instagram as well. And I'm just now accepting new patients. It'll say I'm not on my website, but email us and my front office can talk to you just for a little bit though, and then I'm gonna close it up again.
Okay. Yeah, because you can only serve so many people well.
Exactly. I do a concierge membership base, so people have all access to me between appointments. There's a ton of accountability, and I keep it really small.
Wow, you have to.
Yeah.
Because you only have so much time and energy for a day. And you're a wife to be.
Yes.
When is the big day?
We don't have one yet.
Okay.
Okay.
Definitely
maybe-
not saying it on air. Either.
Okay. Okay,
But we actually don't have one yet.
No, and in this area, you have to really reserve like a year or two
you're
ahead of
right,
time.
you're right.
Once you find your venue, it's like, oh, 2027? Yeah.
We're gonna do something really small. We're talking like backyard barbecue.
Oh, that's very
Like
sweet.
very not
Nice.
traditional. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So I'd love it if we could include the study that you were referencing,
Absolutely.
because in the show notes, so people can really, I think it's really important that everyone who's making the decision whether to use these drugs or not to use them does their own research and gets really confident about the risks that you might be taking or not. And to me, like whether you go on the drugs or not, you still have to do your work.
100%.
And if you're going to use them as a tool, like I love how you said that, because they are not the solution. The solution is actually in your heart, I believe. It's in your belly and it's in your cells. And in order to make a shift, it's got to be from the inside out and the outside in, from my perspective. Yeah. Well, thank you so much,
so
Dr.
much.
Amy.
Thanks
And
for coming on.
it's true, she has a ton of great content on her Instagram. I had so much fun last night, like diving into it and learning all the things she likes and dislikes and thinks and doesn't think. And yeah, I really appreciate all the info you're giving away for free there.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Really
Appreciate it.
Really valuable.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on.